Well, good morning, everyone. My clock is showing 10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll probably have some others joining as we go, but we can go ahead and begin. I'm Kim Larson. I work with the Nebraska Department of Education, and it's my pleasure to represent our planning team and presenters and welcoming you to this morning's Nebraska Cafe. Thank you so much for joining us today. This morning, we're happy to have two experts with us who will share information about supporting students' emotional and behavioral well-being. Cesar Torres is a doctoral student at UNL, and he's specializing in school psychology and bullying. And Mariela Resendez Alvarado, I think she'll be joining us in just a minute, or if she's on, she can wave. She is the state coordinator of full service community schools for Nebraska Department of Education. Cesar, thank you so much for being here.
So I'm really excited to be with you guys and to provide some really important information on how to collaborate with your schools, especially when there's lots of stress going on. I think we can all feel it, especially in the mid-school year, and a lot of things going on in our environment right now. So it's really important to be aware of the supports that are available at school and how we can create partnerships to support the emotional and behavioral health and how to seek mental health when that's necessary. And so I think we can all relate to stress. I think it's all over the place, and we are stressed out a lot if you think about it. We are stressed out financially. There's a lot of things going on in our everyday lives that we're stressing. And there's also the COVID-19 pandemic. It has changed the way we do things where, for example, we're doing something different right now. We are presenting virtually. So the way we are social, the way we interact with others and seek support has all been changed. And that's stressful. But stress is not always a bad thing. There are different levels of stress, and stress can be positive. We see that positive stress being that stress when we are engaging in a normal day-to-day activity, or when we're taking a test or preparing for a presentation. You feel your heart rate increase and there's hormones that are released, but that's just your body's message of preparing you to take on that task. And that's not always a bad thing. Stress can also be positive. But we also know that there is other levels of stress that are not very comfortable. And we call this tolerable stress because we can know that we can adapt and we can continue to do better with specific supports. And specific examples are that of like fear, maybe grief, and things that take a while. But when we're provided with the support and care, we can overcome this type of stress. And this is more elevated, and it really calls for substantial support from your environment, whether it be from your family, from your school. It's something where you need to seek help from. It doesn't have to be professionally, but at least having some coping mechanisms in place. However, there's toxic stress, and this is the stress that makes us feel really uncomfortable. And it just doesn't last 1 or 2 days, it lasts weeks. And no matter how hard we try to get support, it's difficult for us to regain a sense of normalcy. So it's hard to move on, it's hard to cope, and it's hard to do our work when we're working under toxic stress. And most importantly, it really disrupts your brain structure. So it creates this chemical imbalance. And it makes it very difficult for you to live a normal life when you are exposed to toxic stress. And I think in current times, we are facing a lot of tolerable stress and at times toxic stress as we hope to cope with everything that's going on. And as there's lots of uncertainty, we're kind of in a balance of both here, I think, in certain times. And if we think about the toxic stress, that's really a signal for us to seek professional help. And mental health, speaking broadly, because mental health in itself is a very specific discussion. There are very specific symptoms and hundreds of diagnoses that range from behavior to neurological deficits to genetics. So that's a very intense conversation. But I did want to provide with you guys some steps on how you can seek mental health. And number one is not responding to current supports. No matter what supports you're getting from at school or your coping mechanisms, they're not working anymore. It's hard to continue. And we see that there's sharp changes in behavior. And this is why it's so important to be partners with your schools and with your parents, because parents are the best educators. They know their students the best, so they're able to notice when there's a sharp change in behavior. The student is not being themselves anymore, or you yourself are not being yourself anymore. So that's one indication that something is wrong. And also, there is increased disruption, not just in one setting, but in many settings, at least two, if we take on the definition of mental health. And that can be at your work. You're not performing to your levels that you used to. Your social environment, you're not seeking out your friends like you used to. You're kind of isolated. And that can be in other extremes too. Maybe you're seeking way too much support because you might want to be avoiding other things. It's just such a change in the regular balance that you have. And this can also be present at home and at school. All those relationships change. And this is your number one indication that you need professional help and that you're not coping with the supports that you have available at the moment. And that's why positive adult relationships are so critical, because if we have positive relationships across settings, it creates a consistent awareness. It allows adults in that student's environments to notice those sharp changes in behaviors. And it creates a partnership among these adults where you can communicate something that happened at school with your teacher, or parents could communicate something that happened at home with the teacher. And that's valuable knowledge because then the teacher knows how to react and to be more aware of that student. And it doesn't have to be parents or teachers. Research consistently finds that it just takes one adult to form a positive relationship with. And that's such a strong protective factor in preventing mental health illness and future incidents of violence. So this becomes extremely important. I am not sure if Mariela is here yet, but if you are, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll give her one couple seconds. Not yet, okay. But this presentation is really geared towards parent engagement, so we can continue to have that consistency and forming that relationship and communication with your child at home. Because children really benefit most when their caregivers and teachers know one another. They know personal aspects of each other and they really understand each other's environment. And these relationships are really formed on strength, because it's often the case when students hear negative things about themselves, and especially when they're not regulating their emotions very well, it's hard to hear the positives. So if you can really draw on students' strengths, those are the attributes and personality characteristics that will help the student come out of a behavioral change and help them cope with what's going on. So partnerships become extremely important in creating that consistency in communication. Some basic and overall tips of being engaged is that you want to become and stay engaged. And this is a practice that you want to create. Make it part of your routine, no matter how small those efforts are. It will create deep and meaningful meanings and consistency for your student, and letting them know that there is an adult out there that cares about them. And that communication is absolutely two ways. It can be initiated by the parent or it can be initiated by the teacher. And I always do say, and Mariela was really, it was a point Mariela really wanted to focus on, is that parents are the first teachers. And it's really important for you to teach some strategies that help your student regulate their emotions at home. Those strategies may be helpful at school. Those might be some strategies that your teacher can use to relate to your son or your daughter. And it's about frequent and clear communication too, because we know that self-efficacy is built when clear expectations are set. That's a huge relationship that we have found in research. So creating those clear expectations and clear communication becomes so important when communicating with your school. And these are some of our discussion questions, but I will come back to them in a bit. I wanted to highlight some of the resources that we had for you that we can discuss in more detail, but I wanted to bring them to your awareness. For children, they haven't developed that emotional vocabulary yet. And so schools use a lot of emotion regulation curriculum at school. And so that's another reason it's so important to talk to your school, because they already have all these supports in place. And for kids who don't know how to talk, verbalize their emotions, they use cartoon characters to help them identify their emotions in ways that they can cope with them as well. And these are other popular interventions that schools use. So into regulation to categorize how you're feeling and things that you can do, or using cartoon characters as well. And I've actually found that parents find these very useful for themselves too. It's something that they utilize to help them regulate their emotions. For teenagers, it's a little different because sometimes they don't connect with these cartoon characters. So it sometimes becomes about problem solving. So this is a problem solving model that I often use when working one-on-one with students, whether it be at schools or in therapy, to help them overcome specific stressors and to find the pros and cons of a specific situation. And these are simple ways that you can cope, whether it be guided breathing. You have no idea how effective this is. Getting centered and finding calmness before you make decisions, or playing outside, listening to music, they're all individualized to you. And this is something that we can talk about in more detail if that's something you're interested in. Also, we have a lot of mental health resources that you can utilize here in Nebraska. All these are linked, and we have them in the presentation for you, and they provide resources for you to find mental health resources near your community. And a lot of them are also really culturally competent for those students who may have some unique characteristics, and where you may need a psychologist who is aware of multicultural factors.